welcome to the 26th of March 2026 meeting of Environment and Sustainability Policy Committee. I'm Councillor Martin Fodor, Chair of the committee. We can do some introductions and then there's, in fact, I'll just give the brief safety announcement that we have to make. So no fire alarms are expected during the course of this meeting. So if an alarm does sound, it is the real thing, and we should leave by the exit of the chamber, go out the main door, down the ramp to the right, and assemble in front of the cathedral. Hopefully that will not be necessary. So in terms of introductions, shall we work our way along from the Councillor Tate, the Deputy Chair?
Hi, Councillor Kirsty Tate for Hartcliffe and Witherwood Ward and Vice Chair.
Councillor Tom Renhard, Horfield Ward.
Councillor Kaz Self, Southmead Ward, substituting for Kai Dud today.
Thank you.
Councillor Mark Weston, Henry Brentry Ward.
Councillor Tim Kent, Hengrove and Whitchurch Park Ward.
Councillor Abby Finch, St George Central Wood.
Councillor Izzy Russell for Ashley Ward.
Councillor James Crawford for Bishopston and Ashley Down Ward.
Thank you very much. So we have full 9 members of the committee, but 1 member substituting for Councillor Dudd, who is not present. So welcome, Councillor Self. So item 3 on the agenda is any declarations of interest. Do any members have any declarations that they need to make in terms of any business on the agenda?
Thanks, everyone. There's a public statement that is put in on behalf of Hawley. So Hawley is my place of work outside of being a councillor. It's a building services consultancy that occasionally works on behalf of property developers in the city, which may be impacted by the heat network zone. Okay. No. I didn't know I was going in, to be honest. It was a surprise to me as much as it was to you. So. Okay. All right. Thanks, Councillor Crawford. I don't think you have to recuse yourself, but thank you for declaring the interest. So item 4 is the minutes of the previous meeting. Is everyone happy to take this as a correct record of the last meeting? Thanks. Would anyone like to second it?
Yeah, I'll second them.
Thanks very much, Councillor Tate. So minutes are recorded as the correct record. So item 5 is Chair's announcements. I'm glad to have a couple of 2 or 3 announcements to make to the committee and to the public. So we've previously approved the Nature Together project, a £1 million project with community groups to promote community-led action on nature. That's now underway. It will improve the arrangements for community nature action on council land and offer support for volunteers and skills development. And I just felt I could draw attention to a very helpful blog about it by our former ecological emergency coordinator, who's now the person running the project, and it is on the Bristol Climate and Nature Partnership website. So I think that's a helpful article if you want to see what's underway. Secondly, another previous decision of the committee, we had a very successful raising of £2 million for our community mutual investment scheme last year. Just a year ago it started. That's the largest and fastest raised by council of savings from local residents and others. And it's created the £2 million Bristol Climate Action Fund. And it's nice to see that their participation and contribution from Unity Bank into that fund is made it into their annual impact report of Unity Bank. But plans are now being made to how we invest the capital that we have to help with decarbonisation by the council. It's also currently Bristol Spring Clean time, supported by Bristol Waste. I'm delighted they're offering communities action to litter picking kits and the removal of waste. If more communities want to take part in litter picking, please do get in touch with Bristol Waste. And it's very positive to see the involvement of the Bristol Business Improvement District in a clean-up project in Broadmead on Saturday. And then finally, we did get some positive publicity for all our action on fly tipping by Bristol Waste, and the council reported on Bristol on BBC National News last week. They came to Bristol to see the action on fly tipping challenge and the work we're doing to clear it and enforce against it. And I was pleased to see that our enforcement team did successfully seize a truck recently that was used by waste criminals for fly tipping, and that will be destroyed any time now, as is the sort of procedure when the vehicles used are seized. So I'm glad to see action is being taken on that. Thanks very much. Item 6 is public forum. We have 2 questions, but I don't believe the questioners are here. Adewale Adichan or David Durant, but they have been sent a response by the council, so that is in their hands. And then we have a number of 6 public forum statements that have been received. We've had access to all of those, but I believe we have one of the presenters, Susan Carter, who would like to summarise your statement. Please go ahead now. Thanks very much.
I present our statement on the blue-green walking infrastructure strategy. I'm from the Bristol Walking Alliance, and you'll all know, councillors, from reading our document 50 Ways to Better Walking, that we attach a lot of importance to green infrastructure in particular. And we were very pleased that we were included in earlier discussions on the strategy. We are disappointed that what has emerged is less ambitious than we expected. It's really, we understand the financial constraints, but it is disappointing that it's largely a description of what's happening or should be happening, with action, firm action, only proposed via regeneration plans or in the areas of lowest satisfaction and greatest need, and obviously wouldn't disagree with the priority. In our statement, which no doubt you've read, and I won't read, we've drawn attention in paragraphs 3 and 4 to our particular concerns. The main one is that there isn't a forward programme of coordinated citywide action, and also that there's no provision for monitoring and evaluation. We're disappointed there isn't going to be any consultation. We'd have sought clarification of how there is going to be better coordination between the various silos. There's a lot happening, but no sense that it's all being brought together, and we'd like it expanded to involve others outside the council too. We are very keen to have a green grid of linked walking routes across the city. This is an ancient proposal that's been put forward for as long as I've been working on these issues, and it would bring a lot of benefits, but there's only a suggestion that there be green grids via regeneration plans in regeneration areas. Concerned about maintaining the green infrastructure, because else it's not a benefit. Well, it may be a benefit to wildlife if it's allowed to be rampant, but not to people. And we'd like a clearer distinction between the benefits of green space and of nature. We'd like clear quality standards with targets and funding. And we'd like a commitment to increasing the usable green space in central and inner Bristol, which is already very limited and under current plans is forecast to drop to a really negligible space per head. So those are our concerns. Thank you very much.
Sure. Thanks very much for submitting them and for bringing the comments here, and we will sort of take account of those. Thanks very much indeed. And it was helpful that a lot of the comments made have been quite constructive, and I'm sure we will try and sort of incorporate them accordingly. Thanks for that. So item 7 is a report on the proposed central Bristol heat network, which is going to be presented. Is that by Alex Minshall? Is that right? So the heat network zone is an opportunity to drive forward with government support the expansion and formalisation of the heat network in the central area of Bristol, and we have been made an offer by the government, I think, to be early adopters of this. So go ahead, present the report. Thank you.
Indeed, thank you, Chair. So I'm Alex Minshall, I'm Sustainable City and Climate Change Manager, and I'm joined today by my colleague Ben Smallwood, who's Sustainable City Manager, and we'll just like to present the paper to you, and then very keen to take questions from you. So as members are aware, the climate strategy for the city and our investment plans and action plans place a lot of importance on the role of district heating in decarbonising the city, and in particular decarbonising the more dense areas of the city where you have the greatest heat loads and the smallest amount of space for the provision of new heating systems. And so a heat network, as many of you will be familiar, is an area-wide heating system where multiple buildings are supported from a single heat source and a series of underground pipes. And we currently have several small networks in the city which have been developed over the last few years by the City Council. And they're servicing about 13,000 homes at the moment. And not only do we see heat networks as really important, so does the government. And in fact, not just this government, but the previous government. And the previous government initiated much of this, the work around heat network zoning as a concept, and that has then been enacted in the Energy Act 2023. But the current government has really added weight to that by making it a core plank of the new Warm Homes Plan. And that sets out transformational investment by the government into the decarbonisation of homes, the improvement of their energy efficiency, and the lowering of bills. And what we're doing with this heat network zoning is absolutely aligned to that strategy, as well as to our own strategies that I started off talking about. And because of our relatively advanced status in this area, we've been working with government for some time to think about, help shape what zoning might look like, and to help define the policies. And so the government has offered Bristol and a number of places the opportunity to be in a first wave of places to bring in this new concept of a heat network zone. So a heat network zone is an area where we'll have new regulations under the Energy Act, where new buildings will be expected to connect to development, to the heat network, pre-existing buildings with that serve multiple homes or multiple commercial units and are served by a communal heating system. So that might be a block of flats with a central boiler that currently serves those. And also existing buildings that have a large heat demand. And that could be a sort of medium-sized office building, which might be in the single occupation, but which has a suitable heating system, essentially a wet heating system, like a central heating system at home, where you will be able to replace the boiler with a connection to the heat network, which is kind of what we would be doing in this building when we connect it to the heat network. We'll go to where the boiler is, bring a pipe from Park Street and connect into that boiler house and then into the heating system. On the map, on the screen, you can see the proposed, in figure 1, the proposed heat network zone for central Bristol. And on figure 2, you can see the existing heat network, the planned heat network that's envisaged out through the rest of this decade, and then what has been described as the conceptual network, so areas where we've already started work, or partners have started work on thinking about the designs of those areas, but they would probably be built during the 2030s. And you'll notice a difference between those two, that the actual planned and conceptual networks cover a smaller area than the larger proposed zone. And that begs an obvious question of why. And there's several reasons for that. We've been working with the government and their consultants using a national heat zoning model. So they've got the whole country energy demand in this model, And then from that, they'll be able to identify the areas of the country with appropriate levels of heat demand, where provision of a heat network would provide a lower cost heating solution to the buildings than each of those buildings installing their own air source heat pump. Because of course, if we're going to become net zero, then we won't be having gas boilers. So it's about, and that model has identified, broadly speaking, this area in Bristol as meeting that criteria. It also includes some areas where there isn't currently a big heat load. So if you look at St Philip's, which is sitting, which I think if you can see, identify on the map as sitting in the lower half of Lawrence Hill ward, there isn't a big heat load there, but it is one of the largest redevelopment areas in the UK, and there will be a big heat load. And so we expect those buildings, all that new development, to be on the heat network if it has a heat demand. And so we've added the development areas to the modelled map, because the model doesn't know about what's going to happen in those areas. And there's several of those been added around, to some extent, around the edges of this. And so then the other question that the map discrepancy prompts is, why now? Why don't you define the zone for now and then add to it later? And really that's because it gives us the opportunity, we want to try and create as much certainty as possible for people and start to map out the kind of timetables of when they might expect to connect. But it also means that if there is significant new development in the area, then it will be obliged to connect to a heat network or provide provision for connection to a heat network, and that new development might start new networks and enable the planned network to be developed in the gaps that it's not currently planned. And so that's part of the rationale for doing that now. And so we're recommending that we operate that larger zone. And of course, the zone's requirements to connect to the heat network only really apply when there is a heat network to connect to. So if you're in a part of the city where there isn't a heat network and it isn't going to be going for a while, the be included doesn't have any adverse effects on you. It's just sort of laying out the clarity of the future. I have noticed that there may be a typo or an error in the document at paragraph 25, where it looks like the reference to the figure has got corrupted, but the words are there. It's just there's a bit of code that shouldn't be. So that hopefully explains the two maps. The other important thing that we're asking you to make, we're making a recommendation on today is about a new body called a zone coordinator. The idea is that each of the zones in the country, or each area of the country, so Bristol or the west of England, would have a zone coordinating body that would coordinate its zone or zones. That body, we're expecting to be sitting with the local authority or with the combined authority, and there's some work proceeding with government to help co-design that. And the beauty about being relatively advanced in this field is that we're able to do that co-design with the government and help shape that in a way that we think is going to be most effective for the city's interests. And so we're seeking to continue that work with the government and with the combined authorities to think about that, to design the most effective regulatory process. And then the third part of this is to note that there is a heat network developer. So it is envisaged that if we were having this conversation in another city, we would be saying, well, the zone coordinating body will then grant consent to a heat network developer to build the network in that zone. We already effectively have that in our agreement under the Bristol City Leap partnership with Vattenfall Heat UK, who already have a concession that starts to look quite not dissimilar from that consent. And so the government has advised that we can expect to transfer that arrangement into the new regulations as we move forward, enabling the development process of the heat network to continue at pace without having to go through a 2-year procurement process to appoint another network developer. Crucially, what we want to do through the zone coordinating body work is make sure that any actual or perceived conflicts of interest that people might see through the Bristol City Leap arrangements are appropriately managed and dealt with. So we can do that. And then the key part of this proposal then is that we seek to consult on this proposal. Now this is slightly unusual because the government hasn't yet published the statutory instruments which will bring the provisions of the Energy Act into legislation. So you're thinking, well, why are you proposing to consult on a thing where you haven't got all the details for? And what we're proposing to do is to consult when we have those details, but to get your permission tonight, hopefully, to be in a position to do that as soon as possible so that we can bring certainty to the network developer and we can bring certainty to building owners as quickly as possible. And there's a certain sort of complexity in that. The statutory instrument will provide for zone coordinating bodies to undertake consultation on zones. But they won't give power to local authorities to do that. So until we set up the zone coordinating body, we couldn't have a consultation in Bristol. So if we waited until the statutory instrument is approved in the autumn, maybe October time, then we would have to establish the zone coordinating body. Then it would have to go through an approval governance process to make the consultation on the zone, adding some months. But what we are able to do is consult whilst the statutory instrument is laid in Parliament, when we know all the details and we can have a meaningful consultation with building owners and others in the city that want to, other stakeholders that want to contribute to that conversation. But the local authority is able to do that and then effectively hand that consultation response to the zone coordinating body to make whatever decisions that body then needs to make based on that consultation. If that makes sense, I'm very happy to take questions and pass them to Ben to answer anything, the details of that. Hopefully that describes the broad principle. It's worth just touching on our role as a building owner in that a number of our buildings are subject to these regulations, including City Hall. It doesn't have huge implications for Bristol City Council because we would already want to connect those buildings to the heat network as soon as it was available to us. So this is just following it from our existing policy position. So we've set out a series of recommendations to sort of note the work that government is proposing heat network zones, to note that we've been working with government over some years to help develop this and help ensure it fits best for Bristol and continue that process to the zone coordinating body. That heat network zones are thank you. Is that time limit I've hit? And then the important bit, which is to prove the principle of us taking on the function of the zone coordinating body, but bring that back to a subsequent decision when we know the details, and to prove the boundary, consultation on the boundary of this zone when we have the details from government for the statutory instrument. So that's what we'll be seeking approval to, those two things tonight. So thank you very much. hopefully that made some sense.
Thanks very much. I'm afraid to say, I gather we've been having trouble with the webcast. I believe the audio was available as long as it was being heard, and the illustrations being seen, but not the camera. If people don't mind, we could adjourn for like a minute or two to just try and get the cameras working so they can actually focus on us during the discussion. I apologise for that. There'll be a very slight delay. We'll be back online, I hope, in a moment. Hello, sorry about that delay. I'm told we're going to restart with the webcast again. We're just going to see that the camera does pick up the committee. So. Yeah. Okay. So we shall restart. Apologies for the delay, slight technical hitch, but the audio is being broadcast, webcast, and if there are slides, they will be visible on the webcast too. Hopefully we shall also have a picture of the council meeting of this committee. So thank you very much for the presentation and the report. Very detailed. I hope it is clear, but now's the time for taking any questions if we have them for clarifications or to look at what you're recommending. Do we have a question? I've seen Councillor Crawford and then Councillor Renard and then Councillor Watson.
Yeah, thanks very much. So I do actually really like this zone thing. I did say it, I mentioned it briefly last committee. I do think it's a really good thing. I think it's really nice as well to see these kind of, on these more standardized pieces of infrastructure that we get and that we're increasingly seeing, that it's quite nice that we have this kind of nationally set toolbox and these rules and regulations that we can then apply, and we've got that local coordination body role so that we can kind of do that work and do that local tailoring for our own needs. It's something that I'm kind of personally hoping that we see in other aspects of infrastructure, like say a tram system could benefit from a kind of nationally set toolbox. But aside from that, I was just kind of wondering in terms of what you were saying in terms of our own council stock, specifically our kind of social housing units that we have. So based on what I can see here, there would be an obligation for us to connect our council housing stock affected. I was wondering if you know how many units that would be, and also I was just wondering, is that going to fall under, I think it's called the New Burden Doctrine? Would that then release some additional funds from central government to kind of support us doing that as well? Do you know?
So the homes that would need to be connected are those that are in the blocks that meet the criteria. So it's not houses, individual houses, but it would be the blocks of flats that are a number of which inside the zone. The New Burdens Doctrine is applying to us as a local authority, and so we would receive funding for the zone coordinating body, whatever, depending on the role that we have within that. It wouldn't apply to the capital cost of connecting buildings to heat networks. And so that would fall to the HRA to fund that connection for the council blocks. And if we were doing a corporate building, it would fall to the general fund to do that. Whether the government is seeking to provide funding for domestic retrofit through the Warm Homes Plan. The Warm Homes Plan is a very strategic document and not a detailed document, and there are a number of pieces of work that need to take place under that, which then might provide funding which could be suitable for those connection fees. Ben, do you have anything you wanted to add?
I can't tell you the exact number of homes, but I think we think about 16 of the council house block, apartment blocks are within the zone and would fall under the scope of being required to connect. Just on the costs, and this is the government are planning to in the future, we're not exactly sure when, in the next couple of years, pass further legislation that caps the connection costs to buildings within the zones. And while that will be subject to more work and consultation, their proposal for communally heated residential buildings is the connection cost for that building is nothing. Obviously, there's still an actual cost to providing that, and how they're going to support that and ensure that, you know, heat network developers do connect, we don't know. But that is the current proposal of the government. So if that goes ahead, there would be no direct cost in capital to the council for connecting those buildings if they had to connect under this legislation. But that's all TBC, so it's not part of this tranche of regulations they're passing now for cost caps.
Okay, great. Thank you. And then just another couple of questions as well, if I may. Yeah, so as well as that, in terms of the obligations on kind of multiple residential units, I know in some countries they do have district heating networks that will go to single-family homes. I was wondering if, in your kind of discussions with the government, whether they're kind of looking at that roadmap of future. I know I'm talking maybe 10, 15, 20 years into the future here, but whether they're thinking at that actually the end game of these zones is the obligations will be that almost every property within them will be connected.
We haven't, so the government, I guess one thing to say is the buildings that fall under the requirement to connect within the zone, it doesn't mean that buildings that don't fall under the requirement to connect in the zone can't be connected to the heat network, but it will be a decision for both the building owner and the heat network developer whether they go ahead with that. So you could connect an individual family home to this, but you wouldn't be required to if you were a homeowner. But there is no obligation on the heat network developer to connect someone who asks them to if they don't fall within the requirements. So that's how it is at the moment. Government haven't indicated any change in the future about how they're going to do that. And I think from kind of discussions with with Vattenfall, you know, at the moment it's unlikely to be viable to connect lots of individual, you know, homes, but that may change with economies of scale in the future. So it's definitely a longer term thing if it is going to happen.
So I just add, and there are sort of innovation and demonstration projects looking at how you might serve, say, terraced housing, and particularly high density terraced housing, back-to-back homes, where individual air source heat pumps may be much more challenging. Certainly the back-to-backs, it would be probably not possible. And there's work going on in Leeds and other cities looking at how they might do some of that. And so I think it's very much in the innovation space at the moment, which then hopefully solutions for collective systems of some sort can be developed. So it's down the line.
Okay, great. Yeah, I mean, that sounds really good and exciting, actually, especially with my ward. There are quite a lot of terrace homes like that, and as well, I suspect in Tom's ward of Hallfield, very similar housing topologies. My one final question would just be, there's, you know, it talks about co-design with regional, local, national governments, which is really good. It's really nice to see that kind of collaborative approach. My one thing is they've allocated £61,000 of funding, and then I think we put in £40,000. So just, is that actually going to be enough to kind of get this to the point that we want it to, where we're in a comfortable position, certainly come autumn, when the rest of the guidance comes out, or are we going to need to secure some additional funding down the line?
So the 40,000 is also from the government. So the total contribution is 101.
Okay.
That is based on some cost estimates that we did about what we thought it might cost, and they're also providing some additional in-kind technical assistance, so consultancy support to us as well. That is our planned budget for the work. If we feel like we would need to vary that number, we'd have to look to draw it from existing budgets. I'm not envisaging that becoming a future budget ask.
Thanks for that. And you were confirming, I think, in the report that we would not get that funding if we wait for the instrument to be tabled and to do this at a later date. This is funding available if we become this early adoption with a small group of cities.
Yes, that's correct. So the government is funding the early adopters through a specific grant. Once the regulations come into force, then it would fall under new burdens and be done through that route. Yes.
Thanks very much for clarifying that. Thanks, Renard.
Are you coming back round for like debate afterwards, or should I do that now?
Yes, as long as we have time, but if we can be fairly prompt with any clarifications, that would help.
That's fine, thank you. So it's good to see this coming forward. I know it's been in the works for a few years since Labour were in administration, and it's come a long way since then. So firstly, thanks to all the officers that have been involved in this work. I know it's been a no mean feat. Getting to this point, it's really good that actually what we're going to be doing is trailblazing, which means we'll have that opportunity to really set the pace, set the tone, albeit maybe have to deal with some of the challenges that will come with that as well. I've got sort of three questions on three aspects. Firstly, around connection costs and things like that. So it's good to see the detail in there about that they're going to cap. What I was just wondering, it might be more for Alex Hearn, possibly, was how many developments have been affected up until now by the debate that there has been about connection charges. I've had, you know, while I was campaigning for housing, developers approach me going, the amounts that Vattenfall are trying to charge, I think we're in the millions in some cases for a single connection, we're then holding up developments. So just want to expand really in the understanding of what's in paragraphs 9 and 10. This was also a viability issue, wasn't it?
So, thank you, Chair. So, indeed, I also received the same representations, and a number of other colleagues do as well. And I think that I suppose I'll focus on two things. Number one, while it's the role of the planning process to make connections happen, sometimes I think that can be the planning process isn't sufficiently sophisticated generally for such a complicated issue, and you often get the collision of policy with development management decisions and investment decisions, and the risk of making the conditions often falls to the planning process to make it happen. I would say that this move, although I've got no doubt that there'll be concerns raised when we do consultation by the development and investment sector, it does at least provide some certainty, and that there's less discretion. The second point I make is that there are, of course, cost caps associated with this proposal as well, which again should provide certainty when people are at the early stages of their development. But I would say that we, not just Bristol, but every place has a lot of priorities to deliver, and development is now harder than it has ever been, and we will need to continue to prioritise what we want to extract from development, and around what really are our two priorities. And we often talk about affordable housing, we often talk about affordable workspace, we often talk about amenity space, cycling, parking, the lot, and we will need to continue to refine our priorities, I believe.
Yeah, and NHS infrastructure. But yeah, absolutely, I'll save that for the other committees. I think just linked to that though, about Vattenfall, who obviously were trying to charge levels of connection fees. There's also been news about the UK business being sold off. So I just wondered if there's any update on the announcements that there were last year about where that's up to, how that does or doesn't affect things with all of this, just because to have a bit more of an understanding of that, particularly our role as a council within all that, given what was said later on in your introductory remarks around sort of the multiple hats we seem to wear.
Sure, we can get reassurance on that.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we have been in discussions with Vattenfall around that sale process for some time. It is ongoing, and as you'd imagine, it's quite commercially sensitive. We will happily bring an update as and when it gets to that point where we can talk about it, Councillor. But just to reassure you, all that we've seen so far, we anticipate another company coming in and taking on the responsibilities that Vattenfall have. So we don't see it as having a negative impact.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. And then just one more question, if I may. So just back to conflicts of interest. So you're talking about hats and said about arrangements to be put in place to avoid conflicts of interest. Any more you could share about what that may look like? I appreciate we're at an early stage at this point, which would be helpful to understand how you envisage that working or being managed.
No, I can't add any more detail at that point. We're just bringing the conversation, and we wanted to ensure that we had the committee's support for doing that before we get into the detail of it. So that's a bit ahead of us, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. You did assure us that we, when more details are available, we'll come back. But I hope we'll come to the point in this item that we can make a decision as we want to be an earlier adopter, because otherwise we will lose many months of sort of progress while there's a continued sort of delay or uncertainty. Okay, Councillor Weston, you had a question.
Thank you, Chair. To some extent, Tom's touched on subjects I want to raise. I've got two questions. First one is, if we're connecting our council buildings, the council blocks of flats, to the heat network, can I ask what that does to the price, the energy costs for our residents? What happens to those costs? Are they going to go up? Are they going to go down? Are they going to stay the same?
So we currently have provisions in the concession agreement for cost regulation for those consumers. What has also happened in parallel with this development of zoning is the government is bringing the supply of heat into the same regulatory environment as the supply of electricity and gas. So heat network operators will be regulated by Ofgem, and that will include their pricing arrangements. So it will become a regulated activity.
Forgive me, that doesn't necessarily answer the question as to what they might be paying. So, because obviously if they're going to the heat network, they're getting the heat from the heat network, they're hopefully going to use less gas, use electricity. But as one drops and the heat comes in, what's happening with the price? What are they paying? Do we know anything on this?
So currently they're linked in line with the concession, and the price is confirmed annually. So in the context of that mechanism of the up and the down, I don't know in relation to further connection, but in relation to the connection fee and the cost that a tenant would pay, for example, that is produced annually, consulted on, and then it's going into the new financial year. So that's the model we currently use. In relation to the flex of that and what it would look like moving forward with regulation, that's something that we'll have to come back to committee on.
So, Chair, that does make me slightly nervous on that, because there's no certainty on what prices will be. It's set annually. Governments of all colours have a tendency to change their various concessions, sometimes at very short notice. So I'm a little nervous here. I also want to ask a question, Tom touched on this, about the cost of connection itself to it. Because I think in order for the heat network to work, people need to connect to it. And actually that cost seems to be, in some cases, prohibitively high. And I do wonder, and Alex, you touched on it too, where will our priorities sit? If the cost of connection for these developments is high, they factor that into their business model. Do we know if that does anything to the affordable housing quotas that we're hoping to deliver in these properties? Because if the cost of connection is millions, or whatever it is up, then we have seen this all too often, that the thing that gets sacrificed first is the amount of affordable housing delivered in a project. How many times have we approved a scheme where they've said costs have risen, therefore we can't do 30, we'll do 20? And we're almost baking this in right at the beginning. Has any analysis of this been brought in?
So, thank you, Chair. In terms of the actual cost of connection, I think one thing that's important to understand is what the counterfactual is here. So in order to achieve a direction towards net zero and our own policy environment around decarbonising heat, the options are the connection to the network, or it could be something like an air source heat pump. Now, the one thing that's often lost is that the costs associated with connecting to the network include the connection to the network and then the whole life costs associated with that connection. That is provided by the developer. Whereas if one is a building owner or developer and one chooses heat pumps, one would be paying for its installation and then ongoing maintenance, replacement in a few years, and the idea of the connection charge in relation to the heat network is that it's no more than that. In relation to development viability and affordable housing, the way with the collapse in sort of council house building across the country, our planning system has shifted the responsibility of delivering affordable housing to private development and the so-called viability process that does that. And the way it is structured, and the way through the MPPF it is structured, and through various sort of clarifications and regulations, is that often the affordable housing proportion secured from development is a figure that comes at the end through a residual valuation method. So I think I would always urge us and any other planning authority to be mindful when it is introducing new policy expectations that development cannot pay for everything. I would say that affordable housing is very, very important, and where it can be provided without subsidy, we should explore that, but it can't always be done. This is, I would say that the heat network zoning, or the heat network, if we are serious about decarbonising heat, is another important priority, and there may be some others that we need to choose to reflect on.
I would just add just one more thing. The government have published the Future Home Standard earlier this week, which is going to come into force next year, or at least in terms of for any submissions to building control, and that has a heat pump as the national regulatory minimum for any new development. And the idea with their future cost cap is that essentially for a new building, the cost of connection to a heat network will not be more than the cost of putting a heat pump in for the buildings. So that kind of thing is now essentially a national kind of limit, that policy, rather than something that we kind of set locally. So it shouldn't make, this proposal shouldn't make any difference to the capital cost of new buildings compared to what the regulatory minimum under building regulations is once those building regulations come into force next year.
Yeah, thank you for that reassurance. So there's some parity will be locked into the system.
So yeah, so I think from the development point of view, we've covered it. From the cost of usage of and the prices charged for energy, I think the whole point of it coming into regulation, and the government's thinking there, is to be able to control cost, control consumer protections, control standards of service in what is a single provider arrangement. And so I would be very surprised if a future government, or the current government or a future government, instructed a regulator to not ensure that now what will become an important part of the energy system of the country, not to be regulated to provide fair charges to those consumers. It would seem to be completely contrary to the objectives of Ofgem to allow heat network users to be charged excessively for that service compared to users of gas or users of electricity.
Yeah, thank you for that comment. I think it's about 5 years since I was asking if the heat network being developed in Bristol would be regulated, and we have finally got to that point. So that is an important step forward to protect users. Councillor Finch, you had a question. Then I hope we'll move on to final debate.
Thanks very much. Yeah, and thank you for the report. It is really exciting and great to hear that Bristol is going to be leading the way in this area. But yeah, my question, it was picking up on one of the points that was made in one of the public forum statements, which I thought was quite an interesting question, was so with buildings which maybe have already been designed, and I appreciate that sort of having that wider map and having the forward plan means that you know, anyone within that area can expect it and, you know, work towards connecting to a heat network. But I guess for those that have already built in other systems for heating, which may be sort of top of the range, very energy efficient, involving heat pumps, for example, will they still be expected to connect just as quickly, or will there be sort of allowances for if they already have a very energy efficient system that would be disrupted by this?
So this is very much part of the national regulations rather than something we have control over, but there are exemptions available for buildings. There are things called conditional exemptions, which are long-term, and temporary exemptions, which can last up to 2 years for, you know, okay, there's a delay because I'm delayed the construction of my building or something, reason you can't do that. One of the conditional exemptions relates to existing low-carbon heating systems. So if you have an existing building that has a heat pump in there, you have an exemption until your heat pump reaches the end of its life and needs replacing. So you don't have to connect to the network until your heat pump needs replacing anyway. And at that point, when your heat pump needs replacing, you then have to connect to the district heat network if it's available. So it's definitely not going to be, you know, getting heat pumps ripped out of buildings before the end of their life. These regulations, they're very much been designed to be flexible around when the building needs a new heat source in that sense, if it's low carbon already.
Thanks very much for that explanation. So we have the officer recommendations on screen that include 3 points to note and then 2 for decisions by this committee. Does anyone have any questions to debate those resolutions? Firstly, the 3 to note. If there aren't any, can we agree we would take those 3 and note them without further debate? Shall I, do I have to read these out? Yes. Yeah. So the first 3 proposals in front of us are that this Committee for Environment and Sustainability notes the first 3 items, which are, firstly, that the Government has proposed the creation of heat network zones across England in the Energy Act 2023, and that these will be managed locally by zone coordination bodies, which will sit within local authorities and or combined authorities. That's the first point. The second is that Bristol City Council has been working closely with the government to define a zone within central Bristol in line with the national guidance and to co-design an appropriate zone coordination body for the city and or the region. Second point. The third point is to note the principle of heat network zoning as an important part of the transition of the city's energy system. So those are the 3 points to note. Are we happy to take those all together? I see not. Those who agree that we note them, could you raise your hand? Yep. Thank you. So we've noted those 3. So we come to 2 decisions that are now in front of the committee. If I can read out the first decision, and we'll see if we take that further. That the Committee for Environment and Sustainability approved the principle of the City Council taking on some of the functions of the zone coordination body, and that further work be undertaken to bring detailed proposals to the relevant committee for decision in due course. Can we have a vote on that if we're ready? Those in favour of that proposal? Sorry, we need to second that as well.
Chair,
we're taking them separately. Is someone happy to second
could we
that?
see if could we take them together?
If we're happy
Could we take
to
them
do
together?
that,
Is that all right?
thank you. If you have to do that, I will read the second one, and we do have to have them seconded. So the second point for approval is to approve consultation on the boundary of the Central Bristol Heat Network Zone and delegate to the Executive Director of Growth and Regeneration, in consultation with the Chair of the Environment and Sustainability Committee, the determination of the details and timing of the consultation and liaison with the new zone coordination body to inform their decisions on future designation of the zone. Could we have a seconder for those 2 points?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Councillor Tate. So, can we first have votes in favour of those 2 approvals? Those in favour? And that is unanimous. Thank you very much. So we have unanimously approved that, so that item is complete. Thank you very much indeed, and thank you so much for, it is literally years of work on this, and I think it's quite exciting for Bristol to be one of the leading cities going forward with heat network zoning, and really should help us promote a low carbon heat, which is, as we said, now regulated. Thanks very much. So we'll move on to the next item, which is agenda item 8 on blue-green infrastructure strategy. Just have a moment for the officers to move. Thank you. Thank you. And so thank you very much. I know you've also put many years of work into this, and we have had a briefing on it as a committee where we were able to query it. So over to Naomi Chatfield-Smith to introduce this item.
Thank you. So just to introduce this piece of work, it was came about under the West of England's Green Recovery Fund, so it's one of the grant-funded posts within that wider fund. And the strategy is being drafted to essentially integrate nature as a form of critical infrastructure in the city across all of our other sort of infrastructure functions. Have we got the slides up? Yeah, thank you, Rose. In terms of what I'll cover in these slides before we get into the discussion, I just give a bit of introduction and background about what blue-green infrastructure is and why it's important and why we value it. The policy context with which this strategy document's sort of been drafted and how it integrates with existing council policies across climate and sustainability, as well as others, and then move on to sort of the content of the document in terms of green infrastructure standards for the city and how we're sort of promoting the enhancement of our blue-green network. So the starting point for this strategy is to recognise Bristol's natural landscape as a connected network with ecological function. And it's to say that Bristol has a really exciting natural landscape. We've got an internationally recognised gorge, we've got the River Avon, we have a really exciting water catchment, and also parks and green spaces that a lot of residents across the city really cherish. So I think recognising the sort of connectivity and performance of that network and the intention to protect and enhance it is really sort of embedded throughout the document. So the definition of blue-green infrastructure is a network of multifunctional blue and green spaces and other natural features which perform a suite of benefits. And those benefits are sort of climate adaptation and resilience benefits, such as tree shading from giving thermal comfort in extreme heat, biodiversity benefits, placemaking benefits, and benefits to people in terms of their mental and physical health, having spaces to go outside and exercise and connect with nature and other people. And in Bristol, we have strong partnerships, particularly the Bristol Climate Nature Partnership, our catchment partnership, and the West of England Nature Partnerships at a regional level are also really forwarding a lot of this work and driving it. And then in terms of the policy context, which this document sits within, thank you, we've got landscape level plans such as the Forest of Avon plan and the catchment plan, and sort of regional work within the West of England priority programmes that are sort of doing local nature recovery work, regional strategies such as the Joint Green Infrastructure Strategy, with which this strategy is sort of a local iteration, but we've been working very closely as a green infrastructure team regionally to make sure we're really coordinated with our neighbouring authorities on this piece of work with monthly meetings. And then it ties in also closely to the local nature recovery strategy and the mapped measures within that. At a national level, we've got Natural England's Green Infrastructure Framework, which is a really useful resource in terms of providing a set of standards, principles, a lot of guidance documents, and also mapping to support this work. So we've really tried to have a locally applied version, but of linked in with that kind of national framework. And then at a city level, and in terms of a one city partnership, we've got strategies of the Ecological Emergency Action Plan and the Climate Strategy and the Tree and Woodland Strategy, which is obviously very much focused on nature recovery, canopy cover, all of the same types of things that a green infrastructure network includes. So this strategy is a council strategy that will focus on how the council integrates green infrastructure across all of its existing work. And the idea is that the commitments outlined in this strategy will go into the Ecological Emergency Action Plan work. And that piece of work sort of has a monitoring element to it, as well as sort of a wider set of actions across all of natural environments, so pesticides, water quality, those sorts of things. In terms of the evidence base that underpins this strategy, there's lots of, you can tell that I'm a geography student in the back, lots of useful mapping that kind of underpins this work. So we've got local nature recovery mapping that shows where we can best support biodiversity in Bristol and where we should focus our efforts in terms of habitat enhancements. We have heat mapping that shows where trees and green infrastructure, nature-based solutions for climate change would be sort of most needed. We have mapping under the Parks and Green Infrastructure, Parks and Green Spaces strategy that looks at kind of quantity, quality and distance of green spaces and where provision in the city sits among that. So all of these maps have been very useful in terms of informing how our conversations go and what projects come out of this strategy later on. And equally, I think green infrastructure is something that, even though it has been around for the last sort of 5 or more years, it's really the benefits of promoting green infrastructure through councils and local authorities' work is really kind of coming through nationally, and there's some really strong case studies across the country which we can draw on as a city. So just one on this page that I'd most like to highlight is the Mayfield Park in Manchester, which is a new sizable public space for recreation that has been delivered in Manchester to support development coming forward because of the scale of development in Manchester. And that's something that we've really been talking about in Bristol in terms of our regeneration approach. To move on to how this strategy sort of fits with the council's, thank you, Rose, for moving the slides, I keep forgetting. To move on to how this strategy sits in the council's work, we have a commitment within our corporate strategy to accelerate climate action and nature recovery. And as part of that, we have a commitment to work with partners to develop blue and green infrastructure, such as increased tree canopy and restored waterways, which provide protection from extreme weather. And also within that corporate strategy, we identify ourselves as an organisation that's prevention focused. And I think that's a really key part because a lot of this green infrastructure and climate work sits in very long time scales and the benefits aren't always tangibly economic in the immediate term, but they will have economic savings from damage avoided in the long term. And I think we really sort of take that view in terms of why we've put together this strategy. We have existing targets in the council, so this strategy isn't trying to reinvent the wheel or create something brand new. It's very much trying to support and knit together existing work. So we've sort of published commitments for trying to work on water quality and improve our spaces managed for nature in our ecological emergency strategy. We've committed to trying to increase canopy cover through our tree and woodland strategy. And we've committed to try and ensure that everybody has good access to accessible and high quality green spaces close to where they live to recognise those social benefits. And those targets that we have published across multiple plans slot really nicely into the green infrastructure framework that Natural England sort of promotes. And the standards within that are about accessible green spaces, an urban greening factor. Those two standards are primarily delivered through planning policy. Urban greening factor is about trying to increase the amount of green cover on new sites when they're developed. And accessible green space standards are challenging against a rising urban density, but nonetheless important and sort of stated throughout our planning policy and our process. And then in terms of the tree canopy cover standard and our urban nature recovery standard, those standards sit sort of more towards our park service and our sustainable city work, which is promoting sort of those nature recovery programs and projects. And then lastly, in terms of the content of the strategy, thank you for moving the slides on. The themes in the strategy are towards nature recovery, urban greening, the treescape and the urban forest across our city, and then finally the waterscape. and the way that those are delivered are put forward in the strategy through key enablers that is not just regeneration, but also the way we put our development management policies into practice, how we can co-deliver for nature in existing capital projects and programmes such as transport and flood risk, the way that we manage the estate that the council, sort of the land that the council has to maintain, albeit within tight and constricted revenue budgets. We've got, the harbour estate, our parks service, sort of land managed, and we can definitely sort of promote blue-green infrastructure through that. And then finally, our collaborative partnerships, both regionally and locally, and with communities that are really the beating heart of keeping the blue-green infrastructure in the city sort of cherished and promoted and watered, more importantly. So that's sort of a quick run through. Next slide to finish off. And I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that. And just all these slides are in the pack already on our website. Thank you for going through them. And firstly, for reassuring the point brought up in public forum that once this is subject to this vote in this meeting, if this is approved, it becomes connected to the Ecological Emergency Action Plan, so the actions will be reported, they will be monitored.
Yes.
Which was a concern that the speaker had earlier. So thank you for that. And thank you for showing how many ways it does connect to our existing council and One City commitments and our partnerships, I think, which is really positive and really, really hopeful in a city that expects us to look after this infrastructure as part of our well-being. Are there any questions or any issues? Thank you. Councillor Finn.
Thank you. I just wanted to say thank you so much for this. It's really brilliant, and I know that so much work has gone into it. And also I wanted to thank you for sort of sharing it with all the councillors and giving us a briefing in advance and giving us the opportunity to feed in as well, and for taking on board that feedback. That was really brilliant. Thank you. I guess I noticed that you included the bit about sort of the recognition of the inequality when it comes to tree cover and how that needs to be part of the, how we look at tree canopy cover and increasing that in the future and funding that in the future to rebalance that and address those inequalities. So that's really great. I also noticed that in the public forum there were a lot of really interesting and constructive sort of feedback on it. So I wanted to make sure that those had got to your team. Obviously, that this is a finished thing, but I'm sure it will always evolve in future as well. I wanted to make sure those had got to your team, and in particular, I wanted to pull out one idea which I thought was really like a good one, which was about sort of on the river health side of things, having sort of maybe an annual update on some river quality metrics, so we can assess what things are working, what things aren't working, and problem areas, and if that's something that might be possible in future.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Do you want to take that, or should I? Yeah. Thanks. Yeah, the public forum questions did reach us, and there was some good points in there. And then just in terms of the river health work, we absolutely recognise sort of the way to support our blue infrastructure is sort of definitely to give focus to water quality. And a piece of work or a partnership that's kind of formed in the last year following the council motion on clean rivers is to sort of work a clean rivers partnership action plan into the ecological emergency strategy, and that work is very active at the moment, so we're hoping to report to the One City board in the coming month, and then also to come through the committee process with that work into the summer. In terms of what's needed for the clean rivers work, it's going to be really interesting to draft. There's so many different elements to how that clean rivers work can come together. So there's, managing silt from development and from the construction industries. There's promoting sustainable drainage systems and upscaling them. Really, we need a very wide upscale of sustainable drainage systems across the city, and there are a lot of existing barriers to why that's not happening at the pace that it should nationally. So I think there's a lot of focus we can do in terms of working with partners on that. And then finally, yeah, wider work on sort of data and monitoring water quality sort of metrics, because rather than being outcome focused in terms of showing the tangible, shift from moderate to good status, it would be nice to have some more detailed metrics so we can monitor our progress sort of more accurately.
Thanks very much for a full response there. Councillor Weston, and then... Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
Thank you for a very good report. I will start off a bit grumpy as somebody new to this committee. Blue-green infrastructure. I think we need to be a little bit careful with language if we're trying to sort of sell this to the general public. But other than that, it's a really good report. And I think, as was mentioned about public forum, there's some good things in public forum. I note from some people I know from North Bristol, Trout in the Trim and Friends of Badock's Wood, both sort of communities that are involved around the South Mead ward, and so I think it's worth noting some of the things they're saying, particularly about the trim and the stuff that's coming from development further north, because the trim, really to start right up towards the boundary of probably close to Hembury or but yeah, I think and I'm really pleased in this report. You've got many good references to South Mead developments, Aylesbury Walk, Embleton Road, for example. But one thing that does concern me, perhaps, with these schemes is things like SUDS, is the ongoing maintenance. Because I was at Team South Mead just on Tuesday, and Ironside has some very good SUDS schemes as part of that development, but people make comments that it needs to be sort of kept, maintained, and particularly if we're trying to sort of sell this to more deprived wards. So I don't know if you want to take that as a question or just an observation, but yeah.
Mm-hmm. No, thank you. Sorry.
I think you're absolutely right, and I think that is a key challenge, and I think that part of what we're trying to do with this strategy is be really clear about what our priorities are, and then ensuring that if we put in place new infrastructure, that the maintenance arrangements have been put in place and that things are not put in place without that. But it is a key challenge given the council's very constrained budgets.
And just a point to add on the community groups side of it and the sort of community action on rivers, I think that's a really key part of taking forward some of our water quality work. And Peter Coleman-Smith in Trout on the Trim has been very much influencing how we kind of coordinate those forums and to link me to communities across Bristol to take forward this work. So I think that's really positive.
Yeah, if I just may follow up on that one, because Sustainable Westbourne Trim, for example, are doing good work beyond Westbourne Trim to keep the trim clean and doing things like litter picking as well. And it's so, I think the council has a duty to maybe support these in whatever way it can. There's so much to talk about here in terms of voluntary organisations. They do such great work across the city. We're just really keen that we recognise that and be thankful and support them in any way we can.
I'd absolutely agree, and I think Councillor Fodor mentioned the Nature Together project, which is really looking at how do we help work with communities on helping them to improve access to nature in their neighbourhoods, but also things like the Sustainable Westbourne Trim, and I'm familiar with their litter picks on the trim and the huge amounts of material they are bringing. Litter picking is probably an understatement of what they do. And Bristol Waste have a very good relationship in terms of disposing of that material that they collect as well. So supporting them very practically in that way as well as in other ways.
It's also worth mentioning that their water butt pilot in the trim is a really good showcase of how we can roll out sort of water butt schemes, because the water quality problem could be framed as a rainwater management problem. So we can connect and disconnect downpipes very wide scale and sort of localize that sustainable drainage systems model so that it's not seen as something that's very technical and confusing and only put in by developers with very complex management and maintenance arrangements, but actually something that everybody can locally do and work on and be supported to do. I think that's the sort of framing of sustainable drainage systems in my mind, is it's very much a all hands on deck.
And if I may briefly follow up on that one, Chair, sorry, Mark, but you know, we've got issues around flooding across the city, and I think any citizen will sort of see the runoff from hardened surfaces. So I think trying to capture that at source is really important, and this is why this is a really good paper.
Yeah, thanks for raising those points, Councillor Sullivan. Thanks for the responses. And just get back to your earlier point, the regularisation of integrating sustainable urban drainage into development is I think still a challenge. The inertia in the system that says if you build it a traditional way and put drains in and pour it down a pipe, then that's looked after and it's taken care of and we know who's responsible. But if you do it in this more nature-based route, we have to think about it and pilot it and work out ways to maintain it that are alternative. And that's been a frustration. I think I referred to it in my first speech in 2014 when I was elected to the council, because it's still a problem, and I think it should have been solved by now. Councillor Weston, you had a question.
I've got a few, if I may. I like the report. Not a problem. I'm going to be voting for it. I think it's very good. A lot of good work gone into it. I particularly like things around the floating harbour and all the rest of it. I did have a couple of questions and observations, though, if I may. Page 7, when we're talking about the area zones of supply of open space, we've got central, inner urban and city-wide. Now, representing a utterly edge of the city's suburban area, which one of those do I fit in? Where does Henbury and Brentry matter? Is that in the city-wide bit? Because I'm not quite sure. Why no suburb?
So that piece of mapping work was an underpinning to the Parks and Green Spaces strategy, so there should be a map in that document in terms of where the boundaries of those zones are. Okay,
fair enough. If I then, we go to, and this is sort of building on a little bit on what Kaz was saying, the joint approach with WECA and their combined thing, and I've raised this in WECA. The problem we've got there is all the house building on the edge of the city, and the huge amount of silt runoff goes through the Hazel Brook and then into the Trim and then into the Avon. And almost no effort was made, at least initially, to try and dam that, so it just flowed straight through. So I would just flag up that I think we really do need to make sure our partners on the edge of the city, and Tim's going to enjoy this, down in his neck of the woods, and they start building down there as well, even more building, is to make sure the partners do their work. I can't help but feel they've done reed beds down there or something. We wouldn't have had the problems we had here. So just an observation on there. Pond. Well, we've got two. Apparently it's where the polo pitches are going to be. Now it's water polo, so we're all good. No, I kid you not. They were meant to be football pitches, and now they're underwater. So thank God no one told them it floods. Again, what Kaz said, when we talk about SUDs, there are examples in my ward where we've built the SUD, and then we hand it over to the Parks Department to maintain, and the Parks Department have no expertise in maintaining SUDs. Now, if we plant more of these, expertise comes, you'd hope, but I do flag a genuine worry of mine that we're going to build things that we then can't maintain. So hopefully you're alive to that challenge. And my final one is on page 30, when we talk about tree protections. Hold on, where is it? I think I've even put the wrong numbers out. Well, we talk about urban forests and we need to protect everything else. We don't really have a database of mature trees on private land to then put the protections on. We talk about compensation, but we've had it certainly in my neck of the woods, where we've got beautiful, huge trees that are just carved out, and we didn't even know it was happening. So are there any plans to create a sort of database or increase our number of TPOs to try and protect these beautiful big trees? And so that if they are cut down, we can then get a suitable compensation for it. I'm done.
Yeah, it's a good question. In terms of trees on private land, I think because the tree and woodland strategy is a one city strategy, and there's sort of data management elements within that, I would say that that data is very much kind of, I'd have to refer to my parks colleagues to know what tree data we've got in terms of taking it outside of the land that we manage, because that would usually be an aerial imagery type data set. And then in terms of going to TPO those, we have sort of tree officers that can do that, but it's sort of reactive, so where there's a risk and it's flagged to us, that's when we can sort of TPO and protect trees. But it's quite hard to proactively protect trees on private land, which we don't have direct ownership or responsibility for.
I do wonder whether there's an exercise there of ask people to nominate trees that might need protection into their areas, because invariably what will happen if a land's coming forward to development, the first thing the developer will do is clear the land over a weekend, and those trees are gone before we can put any protection in. So I do think
development plans, in development management, they have to, in the planning process, they have to submit arboricultural reports and say where tree change would be.
Yeah, if you cut it down before the application, or you cut it down and let the land rot for 2 years so you never have to report it, you don't have to do it at all. So I think a proactive thing here, where we actually genuinely reach out to communities and environmental groups like Sable Westbury on Trim, or whatever else, even councillors nominate, we can nominate some beautiful big trees in our patch and protect them before development happens. And often we hear the rumours, because we love a good rumour as councillors. We hear the rumours of potential development before even the council get know of it.
So we hear that point, and I'll follow up with colleagues afterwards who would be more knowledge about the provisions of TPOs than either myself or Naomi are.
Thank you for that suggestion, and certainly I know in my ward tree forum sort of members are actively trying to get tree protection on private land. Councillor Reynard.
I just had a brief, which actually links to what's been raised by colleagues around sustainable urban drainage systems. I remember going back to Cabinet for Housing, there used to be these debates about what the maintenance costs that developers had to pay towards these systems over their lifetime, and ended up causing some challenges. So under the last administration, a commuted sums policy was brought into, as we were talking about policy certainty earlier on, District Heat Networks trying to do the same on these issues. And I think it's probably just worth that being looked at to just make sure that with these new strategies now coming forward and being embedded, that reflects where it needs to be now currently. So I don't think it's necessarily this committee, but I think
there is a piece of work at the combined authority level that's being taken forward by Transport at the WECA to look at life cycle costing, which is really positive.
Marvellous. I'll leave it there. Okay.
Thanks very much. Councillor Russell, you had a question.
Yeah, thank you again. Great report and presentation. I was wondering if you would also be presenting this to other teams in the council, like Councillor Weston alluded to, like, for example, parks teams might not know how to manage SUDs. Ecological emergency is such an intersectional issue that it'd be great if you could repeat this presentation, not just sort of emailing it around because it might not be read as thoroughly, but presenting it to different teams, particularly parks, maybe transport, housing. Thank you.
Thank you. We did have a lot of internal workshops in the drafting of the strategy that kind of cut across teams and sort of building with nature training across teams. So very much that cross-council approach I think is really important. So thank you.
Yeah, that was a helpful point. And yeah, certainly, all things being well, this would be something we can do more to promote the existence of it across the council and get endorsement in across departments. If there aren't any more questions, we can move on to look at the officer recommendation here. We have to do that. I will read it out. The Committee for Environment and Sustainability approves the Blue-Green Infrastructure Strategy and its priority actions to progress blue-green infrastructure as a council priority, which will be monitored and coordinated as a work area within the Ecological Emergency Action Plan. So that's the recommendation. Do we have someone who's happy to second that?
I'll second that.
Councillor Tate, thank you for that. We happy to vote on that now? Those in favour of that? And that is unanimous, so that item is approved. Congratulations. We now have a new strategy to link to ecological emergency, and I'm really pleased to see this work going forward. I think it's really important for the health and well-being in the city and our protection of nature. Thank you. Okay. Should we take a very short break? Are members happy to have a very short break before the next item? Just sort of 4 or 5 minutes, or happy to continue? We should do that. I don't see anyone looking for a break. Thank you, just to make sure. Okay, agenda item 9 is the electric vehicle strategy. And this report, I think it's the first time the council will have had a strategy about charging electric vehicles. It brings together work that's been going on for some time, and we have Adam Crowther to present the report. Thank you.
Thanks. So the purpose of the report is to seek committee's endorsement to adopt the EVI strategy. The strategy sets out the vision, objectives, and also an action plan to guide the development of the network. A few facts that are driving the development of this. Transport is the largest source of greenhouse gas emissions, both nationally and regionally. It's around 37% of greenhouse gas emissions in Bristol come from transport. We all know that also there are a significant source of both nitrogen dioxide and particulate pollution, which is harmful to health. And the government has committed to stopping the sale of combustion engine cars by 2035, so all cars will need to be electric by then. EV charging infrastructure is a key driver of whether people decide to get an EV car. Whilst we have got a reasonable amount of EV cars in Bristol, we are lagging a bit behind. So this strategy and the rollout of charging points is important to ensure we meet the requirements of that reduction of combustion cars and the increased use of EV vehicles. So the modelling suggests from the report that we need around 800 charge points by 2027. We've currently got around 200 charge points, so that's 600 more than we need. We have limited residential charging points available at the moment where people don't have driveways. So 2.16 million has been allocated to Bristol from the Green Recovery Fund to develop and expand the residential charge point network by March 27. And that would focus on the more dense Victorian suburbs where there is a lot less access to off-street parking. So the strategy has been developed to set out the council's vision, the objectives and the action plan. The action plan sets out a whole list of actions as to how we will deliver EV chargers across the city based on the evidence that is presented within the strategy. And it also sets out a framework for how we'll work with partners to deliver the charging network. And we've worked very closely with WECA, and it's very much in alignment with their strategies and plans. So slightly longer term, we're aiming to deploy up to 1,000 slow, fast, and 15 rapid charge points using the Green Recovery Fund and the Levy Fund, the Local Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Fund money on public highways and council land by 2030. So the recommendation is to approve the adoption of the EVI strategy.
Thanks very much for that summary. There was a workshop for members of the committee about this. It's really important that we do fill the gaps in the charging network and make sure they're where they're most needed. I think it's also clear that the role of the council is to make sure that investment doesn't just go where it's profitable, but we get these grants and make sure where they're needed as well in areas where they might not otherwise be afforded or accessible. Are there questions about the report? Councillor Kent, thank you.
Thanks, Chair. I guess I should say I'm an EV owner, so I'm going to come to why I state that. My concern here is we're putting in some good infrastructure. That's great, and it is desperately needed because whole blocks of the city are excluded potentially from using EVs because they cannot charge at home. But here's the problem. Why are we bothering to put this infrastructure in if it's too costly to use? So the new street light chargers are charging 55 pence per kilowatt. From the 1st of April, I'll be paying 5.2 pence per kilowatt to charge my EV car at home. So I just sort of ask, what, I don't know, my maths sort of say if I'm paying 10 times the cost to charge, and I should say that's by charging overnight at cheap rate, that's a real barrier for people to use these charges. Now, it's my belief that we paid to put the devices in. So I'm sort of wondering why it is costing so much to charge, because they're also at quite a slow rate. They're only at 3.3 kilowatts or 3.5 kilowatts an hour, which is half the speed of a home charger. So that was my first point. But my second point is I then saw that Ed Plowden had announced, again, a really good initiative about being able to run a cable from your home across the pavement by creating a channel so it'd be safe. So I thought, that's great. I've had lots of people say to me, I can't get an EV car because I'm not like you. I can't park it in front of my house and charge it. And that would allow them to do that. Well, as long as no one parks, of course, in the pavement in front of their house. But it said it was going to cost £2,000 to £6,000 to put that in. Now, that is a massive cost. Then it had some weird line of sort of implying that there might be some grant funding, but then it said the cost would have to be paid by the applicant. So it was very unclear. Now, as you're going to pay about £1,000 to put the charger on your wall to begin with, and then you're going to have to pay £2,000 to £6,000 to run the gully, that's going to exclude the vast majority of people from this city from being able to do that. So I just wanted to ask, there was sort of a line that implied that there might be some sort of grant funding. What is that, and how are we going to encourage people to sign up to this and make it affordable for people? Because actually, electric cars are really affordable if you could charge them affordably. They're not, though, if you've got to use public chargers at excess prices. And our 55p per kilowatt is quite a lot higher than other slow chargers in the city. There's quite a few priced around 40 pence, 45 pence. Sorry, that was a long question, but as you can imagine, the cost of these things is a real barrier. Now, the vehicles themselves are coming down, but if it actually costs you more to run the vehicle than it does to put petrol in your car, that's going to really put a lot of people off. Thanks. So I rant over. Thanks, Adam, for whatever you're about to reply with.
So if I cover the point about the gully charging, then if Pete wants to come in a little bit. So yeah, in terms of the gully charging, there is some grant money available from government for the trial. So we'll be putting in a number of gully charge trial sites based on people asking us to do it, and there will be some grant funding to contribute to that. I think the trial will establish what works, what doesn't work, are the costs realistic. We've said we need to be sure that the council is protected. You're putting something in the footway, there's going to be maintenance issues, that sort of thing. So whether the cost of putting the gully comes down over time, I don't know. We'll see what the trial suggests in terms of what the cost will be. That grant, I think, only applies to the trial programme, so I don't think it's not going to be an ongoing grant to enable people to put gully charges in. Which I think is why Councillor Plowden has said you'll have to pay for it yourself, but we do have some money up front for the trial to put some of them in.
Right, so would that be that perhaps for people, are you going to test affordability of applicants, or are you going to maybe say we can pay the first £500 of the cost of doing this? Is there a plan anywhere?
I think there is. I don't have it to hand. We did have a gully charging paper at Transport committee, so if I get that, I can send it over to you, which gives a bit more detail on the gully charging proposals.
Thanks. And maybe someone could talk with Fuse about their 55p per kilowatt charge, because, for a start, I would only pay 51p, which seems wrong, but because I'm with Octopus Energy, I'd get a discount. I don't need to use it. I wouldn't use it. But why aren't we offering the residents of Bristol or something like that an introductory 40p per kilowatt to try to encourage people to use it? Because people are very price sensitive at the moment. And I just cannot see that many people will want to use these charging points at that price. But anyway, thanks. Point made, and I'm sure heard.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor. In relation to the 55p, it is based on both the market price of energy and our own energy supply. Now, in terms of that breakdown, I can share that finer detail with you, but that's basically what we've modelled it on. Clearly, through the pilot of the lamppost charges that we've installed now, 149, we need to review that tariff to ensure that it is competitive and it's going to attract people to use it. Good news, we've had 250 sessions used on the 149 chargers to date, so it is being used. I couldn't tell you what the target was, but I can come back on that in terms of what we were hoping the number of sessions were. But 250 sessions is it's showing that it is being used. Clearly, we can give you that breakdown as well in terms of which ones. But that's the position in relation to the 55 and the usage. Just to point on, if I may, in terms of the cost per charger install, I know it's not directly linked to Gully, but it costs the Green Recovery Fund that we are using the grant for it. So it's approximately £6,000 to install the charging through the lighting column, including hardware, installation, commissioning and first year of operation and maintenance. So I thought I'd mention that just because the 6,000 which Councillor Powden mentioned, there might be some synergy in there, but that's currently how much each of the charge points is costing. Thanks.
Okay, thanks for raising those issues, Councillor Kent, because it really is, of course, really important that we don't have additional barriers to adoption. It protects the health of our community. If there is a switch, if people are still driving, if they switch to electric vehicles, that is healthier for the city. But we need to know that it's something everyone can access in order to make that switch, if that's how they want to travel. So, Councillor Tate.
Thank you. So I think I've said this on a few different things and topics before, that actually it is quite confusing and people don't necessarily know what is available. So what grants are available, what support might be available for people, and cost is a real barrier for people. So at any opportunity where we're trying to promote a strategy or try and encourage people to make a change, whether that be upgrading your vehicle or looking into these solutions, I'd really welcome a section, that easy, accessibly read section around how to look for grants, or how, if you're looking at upgrading the car, there could be an opportunity to have within this about CAS. And if you're looking, we've got financial aid for that. And I think sometimes we miss not weaving some of those things together as those potential next points. And then I've just got a really weird comment, which is it's lovely to see Ed and Martin's photo in there, but I think it would be really also lovely to have Helen's as WECA Mayor, given that the report is also around WECA funding. Thanks.
Sure. Thanks very much. And yeah, signposting what is available is of course important. And acknowledging the funding, I'm sure we have done, but thank you for that. Councillor Self.
Thank you for this report, and as somebody who's on the Transport Committee, it's really good to sort of see that we're doing stuff on EVs in the city, and there's a lot of crossover between that policy committee and this one. I do feel sorry for Councillor Kent having to pay so much money for his electricity. I just came down and saw the price of diesel at the moment, and for somebody who's got a 2016 diesel car, it's also impacting me in terms of the cost of running my car, and also the general maintenance in terms of the brakes cost me £400 recently, whereas you've probably got regenerative braking. So, there's the cost of maintenance of electric vehicles, which is mentioned in the report, and I really do appreciate that because the cost of ownership may be cheaper. And Councillor Tate has mentioned things about having access to these charging points over the city. I've been surprised in South Beach Ward that people have mentioned to me that they want to see EV charging in my ward because they've been given an electric vehicle perhaps as a company car or whatever. So I think we need to make sure it's run out across the city and fairly distributed. I think the 2 points I wanted to bring up were, in terms of future-proofing, if we look at Norway, for example, they have got nearly 97% of their cars are now EVs. And I just wonder whether whether we need to perhaps think about whether there might be an acceleration to EVs with the cost of diesel fuel and petrol is at the moment. People might be incentivized to buy more of those. And the other observation, going back to Transport Committee, is on taxis. Is there any incentive to maybe to get more of our taxis to become electric vehicles? Because in Transport Committee, we're very concerned about clean air and stuff like this. And taxis, obviously we've got standards on those, but it'd be great to have more fully electric taxis.
Yeah, I'll just say there is reference in the strategy to providing charging points where taxis find them accessible, etc., to enable them to be more confident in converting to EVs, because obviously they're out driving around all day. It's less easy for them to kind of charge at home if they're driving around all day. So that is in the strategy to seek to prioritise that as well.
And in terms of future-proofing the strategy that you've got in front of us, do you feel it's kind of reflecting where we might go, or perhaps have you underestimated the take-up of EVs?
I mean, so the strategy is setting out kind of how we will deliver. It's not saying this is exactly how many we will deliver. It gives an idea of how many we think we need to deliver, and there are various scenarios considered for how that could be delivered. Obviously, we need funding to deliver them, so part of it is how much funding becomes available through things like the levy fund and the GRF. So it's not kind of setting that out, it's giving an estimate for what we think that the amount will be. Clearly, we'll review that under current situation, which may impact the move to electric vehicles. But as I said earlier, we are kind of lagging behind in terms of the rest of compared to the average across the country at the moment.
Yeah, no, I just made the observation that this is a strategy from 2026 to 2036. Perhaps it needs to be a kind of a live document, one that maybe needs to be revisited as you go along.
Yeah, thanks for that suggestion. And as you'll see, the objectives are it's a series of objectives which are listed in the document there. Councillor Reynard.
Yeah, thank you. Two fairly brief points. It's obviously welcome that we're making the most of both Levi and also WECA funding. I think there's something. It's good to see that we're making the most of the pots of money available, because I think we are going to need to scale up and scale up quickly. So it's good that we've got this strategy quite timely in front of us. I do think the point the council makes about Helen's photo going in the document is a fair one. I think that should probably be taken away and looked at, 'cause I think you do need to make sure we prominently recognise when WECA are supporting projects as part of that sort of, building that good ongoing relationship between the unitary authority and the combined authority. So just my 2 points though. One, I think one of the respondents in the Appendix F talked about the opportunity for the council to generate some of this income from infrastructure contracts. So I think we just want to make sure that isn't lost, because there's an opportunity for us perhaps to generate some income and then put that back into how we further develop the network or provide subsidies to people on lower incomes, for example, because I think the real key is it's very good to put the infrastructure in, and we need to, because we know that adoption will take place. But what can we do to make sure, one, that adoption takes place at the pace we need it to, but two, what can we do to accelerate it to go even quicker, and therefore what incentives are we going to put in place so that those from lower incomes can take advantage of the technology. Some of that is a government policy question, absolutely, around cost of electric vehicles and things like that, and there are examples from countries around the world around how they're approaching that issue to try and speed up the adoption of electric vehicles. But I think there's also the point about the cost of the electricity as well. It needs to feel and be cheaper to run, and it comes back to what Labour Council talked about on this committee a few times, and also on Transport Committee, around that just transition and those principles of just transition, that we don't leave behind people on low incomes as we're going through this process of doing all we can to tackle the climate crisis and decarbonise. Thank you.
Thanks for those comments. If there were no other comments, shall we move on towards to the recommendations at the conclusion of the report? And thank you very much for raising all those points. So the proposal is that the Committee for Environment and Sustainability approves the adoption of the electric vehicle infrastructure strategy. Are we happy to see that seconded?
Yeah, see that seconded.
Thank you. Councillor Tate again. If we'd like to vote, those in favour, please raise a hand. And that is unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. So that's the city's first electric vehicle infrastructure strategy now approved. Thank you for that. And I'm sure it will grow and develop, and we will be reviewing it in time. Thank you. So now, agenda item 10 is our quarterly performance report, and that's for quarter 3, which was in this municipal year, but ended at the end of the calendar year. Would you like to briefly introduce that?
Sure. Thank you.
Anderson? Thank you.
Firstly, you'll note that the timings of the quarterly reports have been quite lag for many months, and I think that has been one of the requests through committee to the performance central team to say, please can committees have them sooner. So this is Q3, so it's relatively, well, still 3 months nearly over, but clearly in terms of bringing it to committee as quickly as we can, there is improvement, and I guess there's obviously continued work to be done. So that was my first point. You'll be familiar with the format of the report in relation to an overview with the links to the various dashboards that we operate, as well as in the 2.3, a snapshot in relation to where our targets are in terms of whether we're on or better than average below. How does that link also to city outcomes and business plan actions? What the report has been presented in its current format over the last 2 versions was to draw out particular points of on target and over and above performance, as well as some not so good. So what we brought to your attention for Q3 is the performance around our community clear-ups continues to be green above target, but there has been the reason why it's a red down is because arrow down is because it slowed in relation to the numbers, but we're still due to be over target, and there has been continued big tidy cleanups during March, and so we hope that figure will go up but remain green as we go through to the end of the financial year. We have increased the proportion of our electric vehicles within fleet. This relates specifically to the 10 EV tippers that we bought. So Park Services and HRA are using those tippers in relation to clearance. So we've moved in the right direction there, which is great. We are bringing forward our next committee fleet depot electrification document and approach, so that will bring to life our continued plan around EV, and we continue to work across council departments from homeschool transport through to our colleagues in HRA and our revenue account to work through replacement for EV. I mentioned on the previous item our position in relation to the lamppost chargers. There's the figure 126 should be replaced with 149 to date in relation to where we are and the rollout for our lighting columns. In the context of focus on areas of improvement, not so well, as we've been reporting during the year, the number of drop roads has been below target. We acknowledged in February's committee the upside of performance in Christmas, which has continued, or during the Christmas and New Year period. So we are red because the performance going into this financial year was significantly lower than we expected, but the improvement has been made, and we expect our waste company to continue to put in resource and plan accordingly to ensure that drop roads remain low. Are also familiar with the trend this year in relation to fly tip removal off the highway. Continues to be tracking slightly below, but continued work in relation to the system. as well as the reintroduction of a fly tipping crew that will go live in April. So that's positive in relation to resource. Action 5.1.2, just underneath that last point, relates to our project development and delivery of our decarbonisation of our estate, focusing particularly on the top 30. We are behind schedule that we have reported here. We are bringing a paper to the June committee in relation to an update on City Leap, in relation to bringing to life the project pipeline and our delivery. We know that we've got a number of projects into delivery, but not necessarily in the top 30 buildings. And we know, I know, you may know, but just bring to life in relation to the project work into early stage development for Canford Cemetery. So it's a really important decarbonisation project for us. So we're working that through at an early stage. I think that our stage where we are second only to Worcester in relation to the electrification of our cremators. So good news, but we're continue to work through with Amoresco on that project. I'll pause there, Chair, but that brings to light the overperformance and the things we need to flag. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much for covering that, and really good news to hear that the crematorium electrification is proceeding. It is exciting that we'll be one of the top 2 places in the country for doing that when that's completed. The report is for note. Are there any questions relating to the report? Okay, I saw Councillor Reynolds and then Councillor Kent. Thank you.
So just wanted to start with the fly tips removed off the highways. We've had almost 8,500 so far in the first 9 months. That 4,933 figure that's in there about those that were marked for no further action, is that also this? Oh yeah, Mike, sorry.
Sorry. So they are contained within that figure. In terms of no further action, were they removed? Are they still present? How do we close them off?
Yeah, because that's over half of the reported fly tips, no further action. And I think it goes back to, I think, many councillors' frustration about fix my street.
I was just about to say that.
Things get marked as closed, not dealt with. And part of the problem with that is damages confidence to report things with Fix My Street. Yeah. So occasionally I'll get an officer reply to my council MP inquiry and go, oh, can you please report this through Fix My Street? It's like, well, I would if then when I report it there, it's actually going to get dealt with, which doesn't happen. So I think there are concerns around fly tipping. And obviously you'd imagine for us, after the golden motion and the discussion and the debate at the last meeting, saying there isn't a need for more fly tipping enforcement cameras, well, quite clearly there is, when fly tipping's up, and we don't know what's happening with over half of the reports that are coming through.
Could I just sort of remind, draw attention to the last full council meeting, because we had questions about the need for the housing service and then the park service to approve the same procedure which is used for highways, and that is imminent. But it has been a problem, and we acknowledge that, and we need the same response to say it's been passed to the relevant to be resolved, rather than closed because it was sent to the wrong kind of contractor or whatever. So that has been addressed, but I know it's something that's been frustrating, and we've been working on getting that resolved. Certainly. And we have added extra enforcement staff in the recent budget, so that should improve our enforcement response as well.
We've also done quite a lot of work with the HRA since we last met in relation to ensuring that we can get an agreed SLA position, which hasn't been there, in relation to ensuring that we can respond in accordance with a policy stroke SLA. So that's now it's been agreed with HRA colleagues to be in place by the end of this financial year. So very important, and then building that obviously into the Bristol Waste contract is really important, where nothing should fall through the gap. So hopefully coming back to when we come back in Q4, we'll be able, the data cleanse would have happened on the Fix My Street, and I can report in more of a confident manner in relation to Fix My Street and the numbers.
I think that would be helpful, and it's good to the SLA in place. I remember asking for that when I was in Cabinet back in about 23. So I think there's something about how we get these things in place a bit more succinctly. And to that end, some of my Labour colleagues have alerted me to similar issues, but for bulky waste as well. So can we make sure that gets picked up as a matter of urgency? I think particularly in Lawrence Weston, one of my colleagues, Councillor Don Alexander, has been highlighting significant issues around bulky waste building up, and it's making it look unsightly. And residents are very proud of their communities, and we need to be my broken window theory and all those things that we really need to get on top of that. So that was that one, and then drop roads. I just wanted to pick up on, and then that'll be the end of my sort of questions. There was a lot of focus at the last meeting about Christmas. Good to see that Christmas has improved, but the rest of the year has not. What steps are we taking to make sure that sort of that year-round issue of drop roads is going to be addressed and improving in the coming quarters?
So it's I guess it's the continued logistics, ensuring that we're confident that as client Bristol Waste are on top of the logistics of the rounds. The introduction of the maintenance schedule for the vehicles to ensure that we've got increased reliability has definitely helped. I think we can show that we have had an upward trend into Christmas and into this final quarter of this year that shows that we are addressing it. There were Bristol Waste giving us confidence in relation to managing their staff rotation and sickness, ensuring we've got that. And I think what we can show also is the less reliance on vehicles in relation, so that's linked to your schedule, but we've had fewer vehicles needed to be hired in, so we've had fewer vehicle issues, reliability issues. We know that the presentation of cardboard particularly very, very high, and the need to, as we've been through the task and finish group, the capacity in the vehicles is really, really important. So trialling a few vehicle pilots, yes, going live into the procurement for fleet, really important, so we can get the right capacity in the right compartments of the vehicles. So some of that is repetition to what we updated last time, but those things are still live in relation to keeping a regular monitoring on this. We work closely with Bristol Waste Company on this, and Ken's not here, but in relation to client side as well, operationally, making sure we get that confidence on drops and missed in terms of activity and what they're doing. So they're tracking above performance now, but they weren't clearly going into this financial year and through those first two quarters. So I'm pleased as client lead that we are working closely with them with those things that I've shared. It's reflected also in the number of complaints that have come through. So the complaints, FOIs and information requests are low or lower, as well as councillor complaints. So hopefully that's reflected in your mailboxes as well. But that's a good measure for us in relation to performance.
Thanks. And then just with Bristol Waste, obviously the managing director recently departed under what seems to be quite mysterious circumstances, given how long it takes for the news to come out. What's the timelines for the recruitment process for the replacement, if they're known yet? If they're not known yet, that's fine, but just be helpful to understand that.
Yeah, I mean, it started, councillor, so they're working on it, and we'll be involved in the process as usual. But I can't say any more than that. But they're hoping to recruit someone as soon as possible.
Yeah, for me, just to give councillor reassurance in terms of then the executive meetings with client side and the senior team at Bristol Waste, there is regular meetings, as there was with the MD, to ensure that we are having that strategic client rhythm. So that's being maintained with the holding position on their executive team. Thanks.
Thanks. And it has been reassuring to know that all the efforts to improve performance and sort of improve reliability have continued. And I know they've put an immense effort in both our client side and them as contractor, sort of getting the reliability, the crews, their reporting and so on, and dealing with the materials, which has been one of the issues, as I said, cardboard processing. So that has been an improvement, but not yet reflected in the final quarter, I think. Was there any other question related? Councillor Kent.
Thanks, Chair. I'll be quick. Now, I was really nice. I emailed Ken earlier today with the slideshow I was going to present him, forgetting that he wasn't going to be here. And Ken clearly didn't forward the slideshow to you, Pete. So welcome to Ken's slideshow of uncollected waste in Hengrove and Whitchurch Park Ward. So
just put my glasses on.
We'll give you evidence A. So this is East Dundry Road, Stroke Lane. This was reported to the council over 2 months ago. you'll see it's a substantial amount of waste on the side of the road, which we're supposed to collect within 3 days. This was flagged to me by a local resident. He did flag to me in public, so I don't think we have a problem giving his name. A certain Mr. Graham Sims, former chief executive of Bristol City Council, would really like for you to clear this waste. And he said it has been there for 2 months. So we just thought we would highlight that one. But then there was another one, because the other one beats a whole new record. This one we've been reporting for 4 or 5 months now. Now, this one here, interestingly enough, when I raised a formal complaint at 10:20 this morning with the Parks Department, a vehicle went up at 12:05 and collected it. We have been raising it with them for 4 or 5 months, and I realised the Parks Department was a little bit more left field to you, but they didn't actually collect all the other waste around it. So the green cistern went, but all the other minor waste around it was left. So I'll have to continue with that complaint. But these are just examples, I'm going to say, of dozens and dozens of fly tips that just hang around, and people do report them, and nothing seems to happen. So I do really need to say, although I know improvements are being made, and I welcome that, there is so much out there now that we have to remove in our community. We're going to have to really, really make efforts, and I believe, we're going to have to lobby for more resources if we're going to get on top of this. Anyway, I've already sent those to Ken, although he managed to miss the slideshow, so I'll send them to you tomorrow, Pete.
Thank you for that, and I'm sure there will be a response. Yeah, go ahead.
Can I just quickly respond? It's really great that Graham's still engaged with the council, which is wonderful, having worked with Graham for many years. Ken would have loved to have been here, but he is otherwise engaged providing waste update at the area committee, which is today, clashes today. But yeah, if you could send those through, Councillor Kent, that'd be great. Yes, I think we know with the additional crew going in will help. Will that help enough when we've got so many? But we're doing our best. We'll continue to hopefully improve. So thanks for sending those through.
Councillor Tate.
Just obviously, because the reports come and it is some time ago, but I think it's still relevant to just keep it live. And in the spirit of our last meeting, we had quite a lot of members that spoke about Easton and the issues that they're having there with waste, and the feeling that people are very frustrated with Bristol Waste and their actions there. So I just wanted to keep that conversation live, really, on behalf of the residents that came and spoke.
Yeah. Thank you for that. And there are people from both St Paul's and Easton, and there's been some very active work with them, and I'm glad some of them have acknowledged it's the more joined up approach by Bristol Waste and the enforcement teams and so on is now making improvements. But what we want to do is make sure we sustain that, and that it's resolved as best as it can. Thank you. If there were no more questions, this report was for information. Are we happy to note the report? I see councillors nodding, so thank you very much. So we've noted that report. And then finally we have, agenda item 11. It's, again, for note, it's to update committee on the work programme for the policy committee, where we have the regular twice yearly workshop with members of committee and other councillors and proposals, and that is summarised in this report. Were you going to sort of introduce it briefly, or just draw our attention to it and see if there's anything that we want to comment before we note it? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So yes, as mentioned, this is just to note the work programme update following the work programme setting workshop that took place on the 29th of Jan. So I won't go into too much detail, but I'll just quickly highlight part A of the report, which outlines the task and finish groups that have been established as a priority for this committee for the next municipal year. So those are the Waste Task and Finish Group Phase 2. So initial work is concluded on that Task and Finish Group, but the committee would like to do more, explore more around fly tipping and Bristol Waste Contract. and solutions around communal bins. So that will be brought to committee to establish in June, and then work will be able to be undertaken afterwards. And then we've also got a task and finish group on sustainable food, which again, further kind of scoping will need to be done behind the scenes and will be brought to committee for approval to establish that group. And then at Part B of the report, it just outlines the suggestions that were put forward by members and officers in advance of the workshop and kind of the outputs from the workshop on each of those suggestions put forward. So I won't go through it line by line, but the detail is in the report, and happy to take any questions.
Thanks very much. And in fact, with the completion of this meeting today, we've already covered, I think, 3 of the things that were raised then, which have already come through to our reports today. If there were no other questions, Councillor Self, yeah, go ahead.
Just very briefly, obviously I'm new on this committee, but communal bins review has obviously been in the news. I just want to sort of say there are communal bins all over the city, and certainly we've got some in Southmead, just off our own side, that's continuously being fly tipped, being misused. So just if we can sort of make sure that covers the whole city, not just the specific areas, please. Thanks.
Certainly, thanks for reminding us of that. Yeah. Okay, so are we happy to note that report? I see everyone nodding, so thank you. That concludes the items for our agenda tonight. Thank you very much, everyone, for all your contributions, and we had some very constructive, informative public forum as well. The next meeting of the Environment and Sustainability Policy Committee is Thursday, the 4th of June on 2026 at 5 p.m.